What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Kicks and Picks podcast. Here with you the week of December 6th. Nick, Coach Steve, Scotty, full gang back with you today. And boys, hate to do it. Let's get it out of the way. We are officially on the worst run in the history of the podcast. 9-20-1, down 11 units over the last 3 weeks. A 1-9 week sandwiched in there. So that's obviously the bulk of it, but that was the bad side. Going to bring up the positive side. We've had 2 1-9 weeks, and somehow we are still 68-69 on the season, down less than 2 units. So, I mean, pretty miraculous. If you remove those 2 weeks, we've pretty much been crushing. So I'm going to take the positive. We're putting it behind us. We're into December. The football crunch right now is absolutely unreal before the Christmas holiday. So this is when we're going to make it all back, get back into the positive. If you guys are still listening to this after that 1-minute rant, we appreciate you. And we're going to give you reasons to listen to the rest of the episode because we're going to break down some killer games in England. We got Juve Napoli on Friday. And I promise you we will win more than one game this week.
Well, shit. Yeah, I mean, anybody who came for winning picks just left after the first minute and 30 seconds.
They got to know.
Tirade you just went on. So,
what's been happening to us in the past month is the equivalent of getting hit by a blue shell when you're in the lead in Mario Kart. We were out there, we were cruising, doing really well, and then life had to come by and the books had to hit us with a blue shell just to bring us back to even up the pack again. So now we're going to get back off and running, and we'll probably hit a blue shell at some point in February. So make sure you ride with us between now and then. Keep even with everything else.
Yeah. And one thing I want to say, it's something we've been preaching now for 2 seasons, 2+ seasons. And still somehow I personally have fallen victim to it where we've been telling anybody that's listened, anybody that cares to know, you cannot count on any one team week in and week out. Performance in, 2 weeks ago does not equal performance last week, does not equal performance this week. That is true in England. That's true in Italy. That's true in Spain. That's true in Germany. But here I am, banking on these trap money line picks of a team that looked really, really good last week and they lose. And, oh man, they scored 4 goals last week. They can hit 2. Nope, that doesn't happen. So practice what you preach. I, hand up, have not been doing a good job of that. And I'm guessing by our record, we've kind of fallen into a little bit of the trap.
Yeah, there's some lines out there that have definitely trapped us the last few weeks. So I'm worried about that this week too, because when we get to our locks, I pulled up the Serie A slate and I've kind of been scouring around Europe quite a bit over the past couple weeks. And this week I pulled it up and I said to Nick, I was like, dude, did you look at these lines? And he's like, no, not yet. And he goes, let me look. And he goes, no, it's too easy. We're going 0-10 this week because the lines are just that favorable right now. And it makes no sense.
Our picks fall into 2 categories. It's either, hey, look at this trend that's been going on for the last 8 weeks with this team or this total. And we're on track to hit that again this week. And then there's hey, look at this trend of results that are happening and they're due for a reversal.
Yeah.
And we use that same line of logic just whenever it feels like it's most relevant to whatever our brain is telling us. And that's where the books get us. So it's about figuring out when they're due and when the trend is going to continue. And hopefully we can do a better job of figuring that out this week.
No doubt. So I subscribe to Coach Steve's school of, hey, these lines are way too good, way too easy, that I went completely the opposite with all 3 of my picks. And I'm going with 3 underdogs because that's the only way I can count on getting a result. We'll get into it obviously when we give our hat trick of picks, but it's been a roller coaster and certainly would love to hear from any listeners that, if you guys have found a trend that's working, if you found something that has done well this season, share it with us. Cause we'd love to pick up on something that, potentially we missed. All right, let's roll into the first game of the weekend. It's going to be in Serie A. It's going to be on Friday. Juve at home taking on Napoli. Napoli is the underdog here, plus 190. Juve coming in at plus 140. The draw plus 215. Over under 2.5 goals, 105 to the over, minus 130 to the under. And for a refresher, Juve This is all through 14 matches played. Juve in second place, 33 points, winners of 4 out of their last 5. Napoli all the way down to 5th, 24 points, below Roma, losers of 2 out of their last 3. So 2 teams trending in the opposite direction. Scotty has maintained for a very long time, the longest on this podcast, that Napoli were always pretenders to repeat. Certainly got off to a very slow start. Inter probably started digging or has at least dug that grave last week. Do we think Juve can throw Napoli in and shut that coffin?
If we're talking about the title coffin, I think that's closed already. I don't think there's any chance.
11 points back as it sits.
Yeah, I don't think there's any chance they repeat. Even if they come out and win this match against Juve, I don't think they're catching both Inter and Juve this season. I think the loss of Spalletti was we knew it was going to be big in terms of managerial style. I don't know if anybody thought it'd be this profound because the roster hasn't changed a ton. The loss of Kim in the back obviously is having an effect as well. We called it. Garcia wasn't the man for the job. He was not the man for the job, and that backfired. They had to go over the international break, fire him. Walter Mazzarri comes in, who the last time Walter Mazzarri was relevant was at least a decade ago, right? When he went to Inter, I think after his Napoli stint. So hard to see how they would have gotten out of that funk of Garcia with Mazzarri in terms of being able to put it all together for a title push. Scott's mentioned on the pod before, Osimhen going to AFCON in just about a month is going to be huge. And they're not playing very well right now. I mean, I'm looking back last season, they conceded in total in 38 matches, 28 goals and scored 77 times. This season, in just, what do we have? 14 match weeks right now? Yep. 14 match weeks, they've given up 17 goals already and scored just 26. So goal scoring is way down. Goals allowed is way up in terms of per match. And I think Juve is going to be very difficult to beat. This is at the Allianz, which I think has to make it even more worrisome for them because they just lost at home against Inter, and emphatically, they did nothing against Inter to make you believe that they can then come out and get a result here against Juve.
Yeah, and I think the concerning part for Napoli fans is just how quickly they're falling down the table now. I mean, Roma was in 10th place the last time we talked about Napoli, 4 weeks ago, and here they are above them in the table. And depending on how results go, obviously Juve is a tough task for them. Behind them, they've got Fiorentina, who have Roma this week, so maybe not exactly an easy win for Fiorentina there. But Bologna is 2 points behind them, and they're at Salernitana, who have been a walkover for everybody not named Lazio. So they could find themselves in sixth place at the end of this weekend, and Fiorentina's still right on their heels. So they're not only in danger of again, I said it when we talked about them last month. I don't think they were title contenders at that point anymore. Obviously, I don't think they're the case now. I think they're going to find themselves in a battle with Atalanta for Europe competition qualification in a couple of short weeks here.
Yeah. One thing I want to call into question for you guys, does revenge kind of come into play? Because the last time this match, or at least I don't know if it was the most recent match, but it's definitely the last match that I remember between these two teams, was the 5-1 smackdown that Napoli laid on Juve. That one was in Naples, but I mean, that was really when everybody believed Napoli could win this Scudetto last year and pretty much propelled them to do so. Is Juve had this game circled since?
Well, they did play one time after that. They did play the return leg. That was the first go round in the San Paulo that they hammered them. I remember that was around.
But it was such a beatdown. I don't even remember that they played afterwards. I guess that's the point I was trying to make.
And then they beat them again 1-0 at the Allianz. So I definitely think Juve has this circled to some extent because it's not every day you see Juve get smacked around. And I remember that match. It was January 13th. I'm looking now. I remember putting a wager on Juve money line because the money line was so.
Oh, they were plus 330 or something like that.
Yeah, or we put maybe a draw no bet in or something because it was something so favorable that you're like, how am I not going to take Juve draw no bet at plus 150 or whatever it was, and they just got absolutely demolished. It was a Friday match just like this one too. Funny enough, because this is also a Friday match, and I remember having the game tracker on, getting the alerts at work, and I'm like, wow, like what is going on? And that I think was the match. You're right. That really made the belief real, I think, on Napoli for a lot of people. Like if they could do this to Juve, this team's
Yep.
real enough to win the Scudetto, and they cruise to the Scudetto. For as few changes that there have been, just the manager and that one center back has made a huge difference this year, and play style has a lot to do with it.
Yep.
Allegri gets a lot of criticism from us, from others. I know Nick has hammered him for a couple seasons now, but now it's giving him his due because Juve is again right back in the Scudetto mix, 2 points off of Inter, who they were able to hold to a draw a couple weeks ago.
Yep.
This Juve side is for real, especially defensively. Only 9 goals allowed in 14 matches.
Yeah. Listen, Szczesny too. He's had a very good year. I'm pretty critical of him. I don't think he's a top tier goaltender, but he's been pretty fantastic this year. The D has been awesome. But I'm giving Allegri more credit to, like, not only does this guy just chug along and get 3 points and win the games he's supposed to win, he's had to deal with a hell of a lot over the past 2 years. Scandals and turmoil with the board, and fans hate him and whatever. Players are Nick memes. Players are pretty subpar. I mean, let's be honest. This is an okay side, right? But here they are, right? And Scotty even mentioned a couple weeks ago, like, I think they were hovering around 350 plus 350 plus 400. Like, hey, now's the time to get that Juve future in if you're looking for any value. So hopefully people listen to that. One trend I want to call out in this game, and I've seen it now for the past 3 or 4 Juve games, the goal scorer market is absolutely astronomical. So the shortest odds to score, Osimhen at plus 160, Vlahovic at plus 200. Everybody else is plus 300 or greater. So you're talking about Chiesa, you're talking about Raspadori, Simeone. It doesn't, we don't know who's going to start. But man, if you can wait till lineups come out and you like a particular player, this is the game to put a little bit on that anytime goal scorer market.
It's a tough one too, because I feel like, outside of, Osimhen, I feel like most of these guys are pretty much sporadic scorers, and it's been like, goal scoring by committee for both clubs.
That definitely has.
So I think it's I get why there is value. But I also wonder how much that says about the total. I mean, we talked the total, under 2.5 is minus 130. It's a little surprising. I know Juve's defense is great, but it's still, you'd expect, Napoli to have to go all out in this one. And if Juve want 3 points, they're gonna have to keep up.
Yeah, interesting. Coach, what do you think? Are you a believer in both teams to score in this match? It's minus 135. Do you like the over?
I'm not a believer in either right now, based on how Napoli played against Inter last week.
Yeah,
because you're talking about the best defense in the league last week, second best defense this week, in a very slim margin, right? Not like Inter's astronomically better defensively than Juve. It's just 2 goal difference. So for that reason, Napoli has to show me they can score. Yeah. I think it's going to help that Osimhen probably is closer back to fitness, where he's going to be able to maybe play a bigger role. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't see it where they're going to be able to do that much on this Juve defense. And now you mentioned it, like roster-wise, this Juve side isn't that attractive on paper in many positions, but they find ways to keep it out. Part of it's to Allegri. I think not having to play midweek European matches, we talked about it earlier in the season, has certainly helped them. They're more well-rested than these other big sides when they do match up. Yeah, I mean, Osimhen played the whole match last week and couldn't score against Inter. What's telling you he's going to score against Juve if he doesn't get enough help? I think that's a question mark as well. I know last weekend they also had issues in terms of who they're lining up at center back because of injuries. Or rather at left back, they had to play a center back at left back, which really hindered how much they could push that wing.
So I'm going to shout something out.
Similar setup.
And granted, this is a different season. This is a different Juve side. You just talked about all of the defensive improvements and how well they've been playing. If you're looking at a team total, Napoli over 1.5 plus 175, Napoli under 1.5 minus 235. This is a number you have not seen in 3 years. I don't care who they were playing. They could have been playing Liverpool in the Champions League, Real Madrid, it doesn't matter. So like you're talking about an almost 2.5 to 1 favorite of them getting less than 2 goals. I just didn't think we would see that the way Napoli was going.
And not with Osimhen and Kvaratskhelia still in the roster and healthy, right? Like,
well, that's Coach. I'm glad you just brought that up because I was looking at, I was trying to find Kvara in the goal score props. He's all the way down at plus 330, and so I said I'm missing something. So I just went and looked. His last 8 games, I'm not including when he was on international duty with Georgia because
he did work. He did do work.
He did work, but for Napoli, his last 8 games, he has 1 goal, 1 assist.
Yeah,
it's a quite the dry spell for Kvara.
Yeah, and I think a little bit of that is he's been figured out. Not necessarily figured out, but certainly teams are keying in on him a little more. They're more aware of what he can do. And Osimhen was out a lot of those games too, right? So like, hey, this is the main man. We have to focus on him. Year 2 in the league, you're not going to let him score a wonder goal and beat you. I think that has something to do with it, but who is he as a total player? I don't think that's been answered yet. You know what I mean? Like, we know who Haaland is, and not that I'm comparing him to Haaland, right? But like, we know who that player is, right? We know who Osimhen is. We know who Rafael is. Kvara, we don't know. This is his, 18th month in Serie A, right? So, is he the guy that is going to get 15 and 15 every year? Maybe. Is he a guy that gets 8 and 8 every year? Maybe. I mean, I think that question still hasn't been answered, at least from my point of view.
Yeah, I think the sample size is so small that the jury is still out, because it's just like any other sport, whether you watch the NFL or NBA or baseball with a hitter who comes up and is hot, or a pitcher who's striking out everybody, and then teams adjust, right? And I think teams, it took them a little while, but they have adjusted to Kvaratskhelia. Is he still a good player? I think he's still a good player. You don't do what he did if you don't have the talent to play at this level, but you have to kind of then readjust to how the league is playing you. He hasn't done that yet. He has not had the offensive impact most of the second half of last season compared to the first half, and then definitely not into this season. So I do think that is an issue for Napoli and for him. And I think that is why you see such big goal scorer numbers on him. I mean, I'm looking at the matches that Napoli has played against some of the better defensive sides in the league. You go back to September against Lazio, who's been pretty stout defensively, right? For the most part, though, they haven't scored a lot this year, Nick, but defensively, They're still not giving up a lot.
Yeah, no, only 2 goals to Lecce, and
recently, but going back to September, scored once on Lazio in a 2-1 loss. Bologna, who's I think at the 3rd best defensive record in the league right now, 0-0 draw in Bologna. Last week against Inter, best defensive record in the league, no goals, shut out 3-0. So when you see Juve sandwich in between Bologna and Inter in terms of goals allowed, I think that's a big reason why you're seeing that the books don't believe they could get more than 1.
Yeah, just really interesting. And I think obviously the deeper we dive into it, the more it makes sense. But just the numbers popped out immediately, as we were preparing for this and going through the game, and even just looking at it now. So something to keep an eye on. I think we're all kind of saying the same thing. We won't spoil too much because we do have a play in this game. So we'll leave it for the end of the show and move on to the Premier League. 2 big ones that we're going to focus in on here. First one, Aston Villa at home taking on Arsenal. Villa plus 235, Arsenal plus 105, draw plus 275, over under at 2.5, minus 160 to the over, plus 125 to the under. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Scotty, Arsenal was involved in a 4-goal first half, 3-goal first half today, 7-goal game.
2 goals first half, 2 goals second half, I think it was.
Okay, so they have been absolutely flying. They are top of the table. They do have 1 more game played because the rest of the teams will play tomorrow or whenever.
Yeah, important to know we're recording this one on Tuesday, so there's a lot of Premier League midweek.
But Arsenal is averaging over 2 goals a game scored, just under 1 goal a game allowed. So plus 19 goal differential, 36 points, top of the table. And Villa is hanging on to that 4th place spot just above Tottenham and Newcastle. They're on 29 points, and same story, 33 goals for. So same amount as Arsenal, 1 less game played. but they do have 20 goals allowed. So this is a really big one. Scotty, I'm gonna throw it right over to you for your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's going to tell us a lot about where these two teams stack up in terms of what they're trying to achieve. Right, Arsenal are trying to achieve the title after a really strong run last season. Aston Villa are trying to like become real contenders for this top four. I think a lot of times we talk about how competitive it is for the top four right now in the Premier League. We're talking about the London clubs, the Manchester clubs, Liverpool. We're not so much talking about Aston Villa, as much as maybe we should. And they've been proving it. They're one of the hottest teams in England right now in terms of their form. Obviously, goal scoring has been their strength. I think they have the second highest offense in the Premier League. So obviously riding that as well as anybody. And then Arsenal, I kind of said I'm not sure that they'll bounce back and have what it takes to make a second push for the title, given all that they gave last season. And usually there's a little bit of a hangover, but we were just kind of talking before we started to record. I called Arsenal. They're the kings of the 1-goal wins right now. I feel like every game they win, it's by 1 goal. And that's the kind of mentality and season you need to have right now for if you're a club like Arsenal, if you want to keep pace. So I think this match will tell us a lot about whether or not, Villa can really compete for that top 4 spot. If they roll over and they let Arsenal kind of whack them by a couple goals, then, maybe they don't have what it takes to beat these top, 5 or 6 clubs in the table, and which is really what you need to do in order to qualify for the Champions League. And Arsenal, if you don't get 3 points from Villa, again, no shade to Villa, but with how City and Liverpool have been playing, like there's very little room for drop points. And you just barely squeaked out a win at Luton Town. I can't really make too much of a joke about that because Liverpool drew at Luton Town. So it is becoming a difficult
Gotta
place
give them
to
credit,
play.
man.
Yeah.
They keep games close. Yeah.
But I think if Arsenal want to make a statement, it's, hey, coming off of that win, we're going to win another one against the top 5 club in England right now. So it'll be really interesting to see what the result of this one is. I think the odds favor Arsenal a little bit more than I think they should. But, we'll see.
Yeah, that's the question I was going to pose to you, Coach. Do you think Villa is getting enough respect considering the form they're on, the type of season they've had so far, and the fact that they're at home in this one, right? I mean, we talked about it last week. I want to bring that back full circle. Home field advantage is important in a tie like this. Do you think Arsenal's getting a little too much respect?
Yeah, I mean it's tough too because with the midweek matches that you referenced, Villa's got City coming in tomorrow before this match, right? So they've got City on Wednesday and then Arsenal again on the weekend, which is a tough go. That is one thing I'm going to keep an eye on is how do these lines move if Arsenal gets a result against City at home? Do they
Villa.
move much? That's what I mean. Villa. Does Villa get the result against City? If they get even a draw against City, that's a big result for them, right? And then maybe the lines move a bit more. Right now, just looking at tomorrow's match, they're plus 340 at home with City at minus 140 as the road team. So they're actually getting more respect against Arsenal by the books by quite some bit. So I don't know if the books are kind of waiting to adjust those lines based on how tomorrow goes. Like if they get run off the field by City at home, do we see them at plus 300 again? I think it could move because people are going to say, well, Arsenal plus 105 is a lot of value right now with the way Villa just played against City. So I think that's what's so tough to handicap this match and the next one we're going to talk about, just because we don't know what's going to happen in these midweek matches. And there's some pretty big midweek clashes in the Premier League, but I think Villa's been really good. Like Scott said, they definitely can get a result in this one. When I see them at plus 235, I would take a look at some of those, draw no bet plus half a goal scenarios. Are the numbers good enough to play? Because maybe they can keep it to a draw at home. I think that's where you have to look in a match like this, but it's hard to bet against Arsenal because Arsenal's been so good this season, and Arsenal really has a big opportunity, especially if Villa's good enough to get a result tomorrow against City, right? All of a sudden, Arsenal's looking at this match like, wow. Like, yeah, Villa got that result, but that's a result that favor us. Can we go and now get 3 points there? I think it's going to be something to keep an eye on. Villa's home form has been great, though. 6 wins, no draws, no losses. Like, that is definitely something that is going to be come into play, and I think it's going to really be tested against City and then Arsenal back to back. If they can get, I don't want to say 4 points because I think 4 points might be a bridge too far when you have back to back like this. But even if they get at least one result of the two, I think would be big for them in terms of their Champions League hopes.
Definitely. And I think I'll give the counterpoint to maybe where the books are favoring Arsenal a little bit too much, in my opinion. I think the way that Arsenal have kind of set up their squad this season, it plays well for this December schedule. I wrote about this in the happyhoursports.net write-up that we do every Monday. The December schedule for in England, it's crazy. It's, most clubs have between 8 or 9 matches, depending how far they make it in Europe or if they are in Europe. And Arsenal, they get goal contributions from everywhere. Eddie Nketiah, Saka, Martinelli, Jesus, Trossard, Odegaard. They've got guys all across the pitch that can score. Whereas Aston Villa, they're a little bit more reliant on Ollie Watkins, Douglas Luiz, and Leon Bailey. Those are kind of those 3 guys that are contributing a lot of these goals. And when you get into the month of December, you really have to rotate. There's no way around it, because if you try to play these guys, 80 minutes a match, 9 matches in a month, they're going to get hurt or they're going to be worn out by the time they get to the Boxing Day, 3 matches in 7 or 8 days fixtures, and they're just going to not perform. So I think in that sense, the way that Arsenal is set up, they'll be able to rotate a little bit better. They'll be a little bit fresher. And I think they have one of those guys that can, come from, I don't want to say nowhere because we know their names at this point, but they can be the guy where, you're focusing on Jesus and Saka, and here comes Trossard down the wing and he gets the goal. And so I think that's kind of
it's so interesting. You said that, Scotty. I was actually going to ask you the question, and you kind of took it over without even knowing what I was going to say. I was going to ask if you saw that as a positive or a negative for Arsenal. Whereas, hey, City has Haaland, and Liverpool has Salah, right? At the end of the day, in a big game, who you're going to look to, who you need to count on to get you that result. Arsenal doesn't really have that person. So I kind of argued that's a little bit of a downer for them, but you just rattled off 5 names that can all contribute on any given game. So I could really go either way.
I think it depends on where you are in the calendar. I think the way that Arsenal set up, they're really set up to succeed and do better than their competitors in the month of December. But like you said, when you have that big match, like you would have in April, where it's, hey, we're 1 point above City and City's coming to the Emirates, and this game is potentially a title decider, right? I would rather have the Haaland on my team where it's hey, this is going to be the guy that's going to, gear up for this one, and he's going to get us the 3 points that will put us in the lead. So I think it kind of depends where you are in the calendar. And right now, I think this is where Arsenal has the chance to really grow that gap, because that's where they did it last year, right? They had a huge lead going into the new year, and then it slowly started to fade, and then it all really kind of fell apart in April.
Yep. Agree. Coach, any last thoughts?
No, I'm just like I said earlier, I'm just curious to see how tomorrow's results play into these lines come the weekend.
Yeah, and you wonder if they're going to rest anybody tomorrow to be ready for the weekend game. Either team, not either team. Arsenal already played, obviously, but Villa, what are they going to?
I think it's tough for Villa to rest
at
players
least
at home to City,
Yeah. And then
maybe if it's on the road, you have an excuse, but I think they got to play them. You might see him subbed off in the 70th minute, right? If they're down 2-0 or 3-0 and they want to save Ollie Watkins' legs, then maybe he comes off in the 70th minute.
Yeah, I think if anything, the rotation becomes maybe heavier in the Conference League next midweek because they're in a good position there, or against Brentford in the following weekend or Sheffield. They've got games coming up where they can afford to rotate. Where I think as long as they're in these matches, I think Scott's right. I think they have to play these big guns as long as they can to try to get a result.
For sure. All right, fair enough. Let's move over to the late game of the weekend. Tottenham at home to Newcastle on this is the Sunday game, the 11:30 game. Tottenham getting a lot of love from the books. Plus 130 at home. Newcastle plus 175. Draw plus 285. And the over-under in this match is 3.5. Plus 115 to the over. Minus 150 to under 3.5. As a quick refresher, neck and neck in the standings. Tottenham in 5th, Newcastle in 6th, 27 and 26 points respectively. Tottenham, winless in their last 4, losers of 3 out of 4. Newcastle, winners of 3 out of their last 4. Whew. This is
you say they are not winners in their last 4, but I would argue their draw against City, while they've been so horrendously shorthanded, is as much of a win as you can get out of
fair.
Only one. It's a moral victory, but it is a very important point for where that club was. And we talked about it in the pod last week. Like, if they were losers of 4 in a row going into this match, or they have the midweek match, but
sure,
it could have been a very, very sticky situation for them, also knowing what's coming in January. So I think that draw against City, borderline miraculous. I don't know where it came from, because they conceded 3 goals with their makeshift back line of 4 fullbacks, no center halves available. Dyer picked up an injury midweek. To be able to concede 3 to City, but still have the belief and like the willingness off of that 3-game skid to run and get behind City's back line and score goals. And I think the tying goal, the equalizer by Kulusevski, I think it was a header, and a header in like the 85th minute. And I just think that just shows the motivation and the willingness for this team to continue to push for Postecoglou. I can't say his name. Postecoglou. Big Ange. And yeah, so I mean, again, they're winless in their last 4, but I think that game is as good as any Spurs fan has felt in the past month.
Yeah, listen, I take no pride in it because you were on City, but I did say last week on the pod that I like a Tottenham plus 1.5, plus 1.75 even was kind of the way to go, because they're just kind of that club when they play City. Just that's the way it goes. And credit to them, right? I don't even think, certainly if you told me City were scoring 3, I would have rode with you 1,000 times out of 1,000, Scott. Like, yep, this is a 3-1 City win, no doubt. So credit to Tottenham. They do have West Ham first. Meanwhile, Newcastle is traveling to Everton. So do just want to kind of throw that in there before this matchup. But Coach, you've been a believer in both teams over the course of the past couple of years. So I don't know if you're going to pick a side exclusively to ride with here going forward, if it's going to be Newcastle or if it's going to be Tottenham. But man, first glance, Newcastle plus 175 looks like a really, really good number.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet the money line on the road, but I do think that there is value in Newcastle here, being that the money line is so big, a draw no bet scenario. One thing I was looking back, the over has hit quite a bit in these head-to-heads over the last couple seasons, 5 out of their last 5, including an
over 2.5 or an over 3.5?
2.5. Okay. Over 2.5. Absolute beatdown Newcastle put on Tottenham in last April when Spurs was starting to fade a bit, 6-1. But this season right now, in terms of the overs and the unders, like Spurs is 5 out of 5, over 2.5 in their last 5. Newcastle, conversely, is 5 out of 6, less than 2.5 goals in their last 5. So the play style has been different in the way these games have gone for these two sides over the last month or so. It's been a lot of goals in these Spurs matches, like we just saw 6 in the City match, not so much in the Newcastle matches. Interestingly enough, Spurs is first to score in their last 8 matches, where Newcastle's first to score in 6 of their last 8. So I think it could come down, especially if Newcastle scores first. And the fact that they can keep things a bit tighter, it seems, is can they score first and then keep this Spurs attack at bay, which has been scoring quite a bit. But, they've only conceded 14. So they concede 1 goal a match. Spurs concedes about a goal and a half a match. Yeah. And Newcastle can do plenty of their own scoring. They've scored 32 goals this season, which is one of the 4 best scoring records in the league. I do tip Newcastle. I think the midweek obviously plays into this too. We have to see what happens with the midweek.
Yeah.
I think the match for Spurs is tough, even if it's at home against West Ham. West Ham's no pushover. Going to Everton, we'll see. Newcastle tends to cook at home. Scott pointed out last week they've been a really good home side, and they did it again. So we'll see how they can play it on the road, because their road form hasn't been that good. They're 1 win, 2 draws, and 3 losses in 6 so far. So I think how they perform Wednesday at Everton is going to give me a little bit of a feeling of how hard I should push Newcastle to win, even though like right now I do like them to win, probably in the draw no bet. Like, how hard do I pursue it if they don't get a result at Everton? Like, maybe then do you just kind of take a pass on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the good news is both clubs are kind of coming into this with their own set of injury issues, much like Chelsea. Newcastle, I think, are starting to come out on the other side. So Isak has been back and healthy, and that's certainly been helping. Tottenham still have a ways to go. I think the news just came out that Maddison, who was expected to be maybe back around January when Son goes off to the Asia Cup, he just announced that he's probably not coming back until February, which was a big blow. So I think the good news is, the goal scoring for Newcastle certainly took a hit when Callum Wilson was out and Isak was out. Getting Isak back certainly is going to help there. Coach, you mentioned, I think the defense is going to be huge. I think the good news for Tottenham is the guy that was out, not for injury, but suspension. Romero should be healthy for this one. So they'll have at least one true center half available. Not sure what Dyer's injury is, if he's going to be back or not. But, if Tottenham are schlepping out another 3 fullback lineup and, Isak is in form, we know that Newcastle will get goals. The question will become, how many goals can Tottenham respond with, given Newcastle's stronger defensive record? And we talk about rotation. I don't know that Spurs are going to have the luxury of rotation. Like, who are you going to rotate with? They don't have enough. They barely have enough guys to field a starting 11 right now, much less actually rotate 3 or 4 guys any given match. So that's another thing to keep an eye on. Like, as the month of December goes on, what happens to Tottenham's legs? Do their performances start to drop? And, maybe there's an upset coming in the next couple of weeks where they drop points to a mid-table or bottom half of the table club.
Yeah, I think certainly 2 games in 4 days is going to be a lot for them this week. And I think that kind of plays into the logic of, why I framed it for you to take Newcastle, whether you were planning on it or not, because certainly I'm a believer in that. So interesting. Definitely interesting that Newcastle are such big dogs, considering everything we talked about. And this should be a fun one to watch. I mean, I don't know that it hits the over, but I think we're going to see an entertaining match one way or the other. I think both teams are well coached. I think both teams are, as you guys mentioned, pretty determined to make their mark on this season and certainly fight for a top 4 place. All right. So, Scotty, I don't know. I didn't know how I was going to bridge it because I'm looking at your first lock, but I guess we'll do a real deal.
Segue into it.
Bridge segue of, hey, we're going to hit you with our hat trick of picks. And fortunately, Scotty's going to start us off with game we just spoke about.
Yeah. So keeping it with the Newcastle and Tottenham game, I am going to take Newcastle. I'm going to take them draw no bet. It's plus 105. So you're still getting about even money, or a little bit better. The draw kind of helps. The draw no bet helps protect against another like Spurs 2 or 3 goal performance. I don't think that they'll find another one of those. I mean, they were on a string of like 1 goal performances leading into that City match. So I think that's probably more of what you'll expect. And I have no doubt that Newcastle should be able to get at least a couple of goals in this one. So yeah, I think Newcastle are ready to kind of respond. I think Tottenham are due for a little bit of a letdown. I obviously took City in the match on Sunday, and it bit me, but it's not going to shy away from betting against Tottenham. So I'll take Newcastle, but I will take the draw no bet just to give myself a little extra protection.
All right, I like it. I like the Newcastle pick. I'm with you guys there. I'm going to Serie A for this one. I'm going with Inter. Money line way out of play. I think it's like minus 400, but the pick I'm taking here is Inter to win by 2+ goals versus Udinese at minus 135. Inter's really good. Udinese isn't. This match is at the San Siro. I think Inter wipes the floor with Udinese by at least 2 goals. I'm keeping it simple. I just think that they're just that 2 goals better at home.
Yeah, I
Sight
love
unseen. I'm going to take Lautaro anytime goal scorer. I don't know what the line is. I'm going to take it sight unseen.
No, I like it. And correct me if I'm. Oh no, I was gonna say Udinese like kind of surprised us last week, but they wound up drawing 3-3 to Hellas. I think that they were up at least 2-0. I don't know if they were up 3-0.
Yeah, they were up at least 2. I think then it might have been 2-2, and then they went up 3-2 or something like that. But I know we almost put Hellas double chance into our patron picks, and then it was 2-0. We're like, I'm glad we held off on that, and then lo and behold, they got that third goal on that bicycle kick. I don't know if you saw the highlights, but yeah, Udinese. They played at Roma a couple weeks ago. They shipped 3 to Roma, and Roma doesn't score a whole lot lately, so that should be concerning for them going to the San Siro against Inter.
So the point I was trying to make there, the point I was bringing up is that for how badly we view Hellas, and anybody that's listened knows that, like, man, do we fade that team? That's how lowly we think of Udinese. That we were betting on Hellas last week, even if it didn't make it to the show. But yeah, this Udinese team has given up 3 goals 2 weeks straight. They gave up 2 goals to Cagliari earlier this year. They gave up 4 to Napoli. They gave up goals to Fiorentina. They're not very good. So very easily you could see Inter coming in and doing the deed. All right. So mentioned it earlier. I am going to a new strategy this week. We've been in a little bit of a rut. I like a lot of underdogs. I am taking 3 teams that are all away from home. The first one I like is AC Milan. I'm going with the Asian handicap here, plus 0.25 goals. They're taking on Atalanta. It's minus 130. Just want to call it out if anybody's unfamiliar with this type of bet. It's basically 2 bets rolled into one. It's a split line. So half of your bet would be Milan draw no bet. The other half would be Milan plus half a goal. So that's where the plus 2.5 comes in. It averages between the two. So in this instance, if this game is a draw, you win half of your bet. The other half is pushed. If Milan wins, they win. If Milan loses, they lose, right? But you're kind of making a little bit of money on that draw versus taking a draw no bet or a pick 'em. So giving a little more juice for that. This is minus 130. The reasons for this bet: Milan is unbeaten in 5 straight head-to-heads. They're first to score in 4 out of those 5. And by the way, Atalanta is winless in their last 5 games. They fucking screwed us last week. They were the first team in the history of Serie A, I think, to give up 3 goals to a Torino team. That never happens. So I think this was the first game that really jumped out to me. Listen, if anybody wants to take Milan on the fucking money line, you have my blessing. They should absolutely win. But this is where we need a little bit of protection to get back on track as a show. So plus 0.25. It's under Asian handicap in your book. Take a look.
Shots FC back in the book.
Have to.
All right. I am going to stick with a match that we covered for my second lock of the week. It's going to be Aston Villa versus Arsenal. I'm taking over 3. It's plus 100. This game screams goals. We just talked about how Arsenal have goals coming from 8 different positions on the pitch at any given time. Talked about the 3 guys up top for Aston Villa. We love Ollie Watkins. He's been a fixture on this podcast in terms of anytime goal scorer props. So
shot on target.
I love the offense in this one. Yeah, I know Arsenal has the second best defense in the league, or actually, I think it's the best defense in the league at this point. But I think, Aston Villa's attack is enough to get them at least 1. And as we've discussed, Arsenal are the 1-goal kings, or the 1-goal victory kings. So I think there's going to be plenty of goals in this one. Over 3.5 was a little bit much for me. The good news is in the last 4 meetings between these 2 clubs, there have been at least 3 goals 3 out of those 4 times. So the trend kind of sets the stage for that. So yeah, I'll take the over 3. I think this is a lock for 3, so you should be safe. And if we can get a 4th or a 5th, you get a nice plus 100 cash.
Love it.
All right. I'm going with Bologna, and I'm also playing the quarter goal a couple times here, Nick. I liked what you were doing, and it made sense with a couple of my picks that I like. So I'm going Bologna. I'm going minus a quarter goal at Salernitana here at minus 125. Bologna's been one of the most consistent teams in Serie A this season and should keep up their pursuit of a European spot for quite some time, in my opinion. Salernitana doesn't beat anyone except for Lazio. Scott took the words out of my mouth at the beginning of the show.
With shots.
Took it out of the beginning of the show. I was saving this one to get Nick. But anyway, Bologna hasn't won yet on the road after being robbed at the death against Lecce last weekend, which is interesting enough. But they've only lost one. So they're 6 draws, 1 loss on the road. I think this is one where it finally happens for them. I thought it was last week where they gave it that goal in the 90 plus 10 minute, that penalty kick. Yeah. I'll protect half my stake against a 7th draw with the 0.25. But I think getting a win here on the road at Salernitana, I think is a good shot for Bologna here.
Yeah, and that was a heartbreaker. You mentioned it against Lecce there last week. And, the one thing that Bologna is up against right now is a little bit of an injury crisis, but seems to be a next man up kind of squad. So give Malta a lot of credit. They've looked great, and they've beaten bad teams. So listen, I'm all for fading Salernitana. You've seen me do it unsuccessfully, I think, twice now. So hope you have better luck than I do. All right, so I'm going to roll. I'm actually going to go against Coach Steve's squad in this one. Fiorentina plus quarter of a goal again, taking on Roma, even money. Fiorentina have actually won 2 of the last 4 meetings outright. I think that their backs are up against the wall. We spoke about this maybe a month ago where I said Fiorentina is done and dusted from a European place. I think the other teams are going to figure it out. I think they had lost 3 in a row at that point in time, or were on the verge of 3 in a row. If I even pull them up now, which probably should have had ready. No, they picked up a win. I'm sorry, last week. I didn't realize that. But again, I think their backs are up against the wall, and they can't suffer another loss to a team around them. I just think that's a 6-point swing that can't happen at this point in the season. Also, Steve said it, so I'm going to take the words out of his mouth. Roma can't really score. We saw them struggle against Sassuolo last week. Sassuolo has the worst fucking defense I've ever seen in my life. And it took a red card and a penalty to get Roma up and running. So I like Fiorentina. I think drawing this game probably is the least that they'll be looking to come out with. Could potentially win it. It just seems like a funky game for Roma, right? Like this is a game that Roma tend to lose. As coach, you can maybe put a little color on it, but it's just kind of.
I actually liked Roma. I actually liked Roma on the money line when I saw them at plus 105 because Fiorentina is playing a midweek Copa match tomorrow. Roma has the week off. They finally get some rest, and Paulo Dybala is in scintillating form right now. He's been really hot. I just think Roma at home is a pretty good side. It could be my bias. I didn't want to go Roma money line and contradict your pick, and we guarantee ourselves a loss somewhere.
Guarantee ourselves a win.
Could also guarantee a win.
We could guarantee to win because we need those too. But Fiorentina hasn't been great against the quote unquote bigger sides this year. That's my concern for them. But I know you're going to play in the do route. So,
all right. I will bring it home with my third lock of the week. I'm going with a both teams to score parlay. I've had success with these in the past, so we'll try another one. First one, Fulham versus West Ham. This is easy. Both teams to score is hit in 12 of 14 West Ham matches this season. About as automatic as it gets. It's currently going off at around minus 70, so needed to find a second one just to get a little extra juice. I'm going with one that's maybe not super obvious, and it's going to be Crystal Palace versus Liverpool. Liverpool has scored in 5 of their last 6 matches against Crystal Palace, so that feels pretty good. The important bit here, we need a Crystal Palace goal. We saw how vulnerable Liverpool's defense was in the past few weeks. It looks even worse when Alisson's not in goal. Klopp has confirmed that Alisson is targeting return for the following weekend's match against Manchester United, so that means we'll have another match of Queeve Kelleher between the sticks. I think that's going to be a very easy opportunity for a Crystal Palace player to find their way through a back line and get themselves a pretty nice opportunity one-on-one with Kelleher. So I expect Palace to get at least one in this one. We saw Fulham put 3 past Liverpool on Sunday, so not out of the realm of possibility. There's also going to be a lot of rotation coming up. Liverpool have, the midweek game tomorrow against Sheffield United. They have another midweek game that will probably rotate a lot with Union Saint-Gilloise in Europa. And they only have 3 fit center halves right now. So Matip is out for the next couple of months. That means you're probably going to see some of the U23s playing, Jarrell Kwanzaa and the like. So I think there's a pretty good chance that you'll see at least one goal out of Palace against Liverpool on Saturday, 12:30 kickoff.
All right, I'm going to the Bundesliga with my last one. Borussia Mönchengladbach plus a quarter goal, -105 at Union Berlin. Union has been absolutely abysmal this season. Meanwhile, Mönchengladbach has really turned its season around after going winless in its first 5 matches. In the league, they are now 4 wins, 2 draws, 2 losses since then. I think they get the win here outright, but with the number being so good, I'll take the extra juice of the 0.25 rather than the draw no bet to get a little extra cash if Union do hold them to a draw. At close to even money, I like getting that quarter goal protection.
That's it. You've seen the light. And I am going to make it 3 for 3, tic-tac-toe. With the quarter goal line here, Sassuolo plus 0.25 goals at Cagliari, -125. I will caveat that Cagliari is a tough place to play. Lazio went there last week, barely squeaked out a win, even though they were up a man the whole game. But here's an interesting fact that pushed me over the edge. These teams have drawn in 5 out of their last 7 and 7 out of their last 10. So if they are to do that again, we're going to take half a cash with this plus 0.25 goals. Sassuolo have looked pretty good. They've scored in 4 of their last 5 matches, but 2+ in 3 out of those 5. And Cagliari is averaging just about 3 goals against in their last 9 or 10 matches. So I think this one is ripe. Sassuolo will probably look to get right and, make their way. Not that I think they're at risk, but make their way a little bit closer to, the mid
Safety.
to top half of the table. So plus 0.25s across the board. Milan, Fiorentina, Sassuolo.
All right, that takes us to our pod lock. I mean, we don't agree quickly on pod locks every week. This is one where we were on it quick, and the reason we didn't talk too much about the result of that Juve match is because we're going Juve draw no bet -135 for all the reasons we talked about in our match preview. We love Juve in this one. I like a money line too, but when we're trying to stack units and bounce back, we're going to take the draw no bet just in case to get that little extra protection because that -135 is still a very playable number. But love Juve in this situation at home against a struggling Napoli side. We're taking the Bianconeri, and that's going to get us back on track.
Oh, yeah. Appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, check us out. Subscribe to YouTube, all your podcast platforms, happyhoursports.net for written content. And of course, if you're enjoying it, want some extra picks during the week, a little bit of extra content, Patreon/kicks and picks. We'll catch you guys next week.